Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Tailored Training Podcast, a podcast that's all about helping you get results with your body and health. I'm your host, Richard Taylor, and helping me today with the episode is Principal Psychologist of Body Mind Health in North Sydney and the City, with over 20 years clinical practice experience, Scott Whiteway. If you're following live on Facebook, welcome. Feel free to participate by liking, commenting, or leaving a question. And one more thing, just letting you know that we're still running one-on-one personal training that are 100% compliant with current legislation. So if you're interested, send me a message via Facebook or head to the website tailoredtraining.com.au. Let's start the show. Scott, how you doing? Lovely to have you on the episode.
Hey Richard, lovely to be here.
Yeah. So where are you coming from? Are you at home or are you in an office somewhere?
I'm in my office in the city at the moment, so it's very quiet in the city, but probably less risk of getting this in the local cafe at the moment, getting coronavirus at the local cafe.
Well, I think I've had to drive around. I know that's illegal. You're not supposed to do that right now, but I happen to be mostly a law-abiding citizen, other than going for random drives. The cafes they're like a hive of activity.
Yeah, absolutely, and there's people out everywhere doing walks and things like that, which is fantastic to see. And I think everyone's just, trying to do what they can at this time.
So I live down at Mona Vale. And I moved in kind of just before we opened, before this lockdown happened. And, there were surfers there and there were people sunbaking. And then now it's just hordes of people, not too many people, but hordes of people just walking up and down the beach. So I think this is in some ways has been a good pivot for some people to open new doors for different types of activities and ways of stimulating themselves. So in one way it's a good thing, but obviously in many other ways it's pretty tragic for people's kind of activity levels and possibly people's mental health, which is something that we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, good.
So can you give me a quick background in your clinical practice and your expertise and what you specialize in?
Sure. So I got into psychology as a youngster. I was at uni, and I was really interested in what helped people tick and what helped them do the best that they could do. And I've ended up working in a whole range of different areas and getting heaps of experience over many years in mental health, working with addictions, working with all sorts of challenges that people have, and just really looking at in every situation is what does it take for them to take one step forward to make their life a little bit better, a little bit easier, and really start to feel a lot of the joy that we can do on an everyday basis. And I worked in a corporate environment for about 10 years, and now I've sort of got towards the end of that 10 years, and I thought, you know what, I really want to start something where I can start to bring people together with their exercise, bring people together with their nutrition, and start to think about what is it that really makes someone overall really well. Because when we can get the sweet spot between our mental health, nutrition, and our exercise, and even our sleep a little bit, when we can get all that working and operating, then things start to get a hell of a lot easier, and we really start to feel like we can we can be king of our own domain.
Yeah, you got quite a challenge right now, trying to make that happen for people. I've seen it myself. A lot of people's habits they've had routines, and they've their lives were coasting, and they didn't really have to think about. Didn't have to put a great deal of effort into being healthy and doing the right thing, and now the life's been turned on its head. It's become considerably harder for people to pick up their new habits. So what do you see as being the main challenges right now for people?
I think any time when our old habits are taken away from us or we have to give them up is a challenging time. And most people find that to be a little bit frustrating, sometimes a little bit distressing, sometimes it can feel overwhelming when you've got a whole weight of different habits that have just been pulled away from you. And those habits are just simple things like getting up, getting off to work, going somewhere different, talking with different people, and all those sorts of things. So in this time, it starts to become really important to start really thinking about, and everyone's got a really unique opportunity here to start thinking about, well, for the foreseeable future, and if we start thinking in 30-day increments, probably this is going to be the status quo. What do I want my habits to be in that time? What would be the best opportunity for me? Well, how could I create that opportunity? And what sorts of things could I actually get done in this time? And then from there, we start thinking about what are the incremental habits that would start to make that up. So quite often when we look at everything and we start saying, oh my God, this is overwhelming, I've got to work from home, if I'm in business, that's really hard, if I've got to be doing my training things, where do I even start? So just starting with things that are really small and really easy and forward steps are the building blocks of starting to build much bigger habits. So, what's the first start you would see as someone who's starting up a new training program, Richard? What would be the first thing they'd need to do?
The first thing they'd need to do when they after they've started.
Yeah.
So they'd probably kind of gauge their fitness level. Maybe they'd start really slowly. Do what I think they should do. Anything that's better than what they're doing is an improvement. So that's what just anything, walk,
Absolutely.
stretch, whatever. Yeah.
Absolutely, and just starting with things that are no-brainer easy in the first few days. So if people have fallen off the rails from their exercise, then they can start with picking up pretty quickly. But if they haven't done any exercise for a while, this is a really important time to start trying to do that. And along with a whole lot of other really important things as well, because now is the time for people to start really thinking about, okay, if everything in my world has changed overnight, what can I start doing that's predictable, where I'm feeling like I'm back in control and I'm at the reins of my life and taking it where I want to go, not sort of being dictated to by all the forces that the earth is throwing at us at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Good point. So your approach is take baby steps towards building any new habit?
Certainly, if people want to build a new habit, then really starting to think about what is the end point of the habit that I would like. And so if they said, for example, I really want to be someone that doesn't get highly stressed. And for a lot of people, that might be a really big change. So we say, okay, well, I've had maybe 10, 15, 20, 30 years of getting really stressed. So therefore, to try and flick the switch on that, it's going to be really, really hard. So started to think about, okay, if I wasn't someone that got really stressed, what would be the first thing that I would do? What would be something that I would do every day that would start, or every time I even started getting stressed, and I could just start that. And rather than saying, okay, well, today's Monday, tomorrow, therefore I don't want to be stressed at all. Well, that's pretty ambitious, isn't it? Because there's still going to be things that come up. So we need to start thinking about, okay, what I want to do is just make sure that my stress dial just gets turned down a little bit. And so if I can do a couple of things will help prolong me feeling positive and good, then that's a fantastic start, isn't it? So if we get up in the morning and start thinking about what our morning routine might be before we even start looking at our social media and everything like that, that gives us a really good chance to start managing stress later on. And we start planning for the day, start thinking about what it is that we want to do. Then all of a sudden we can start managing everything else as an incoming piece of traffic information rather than actually starting to take control of our day as it ticks on.
Right. And what particular things are you seeing people are doing that possibly not doing them any help, or little things that they're doing that could be an opportunity for them to improve specifically during this time?
I think at the moment, the news feed, whether that's through Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, whether it's just the news on your Apple News or any other type of news, is just running haywire. And most people are plugging into that. And I'm guilty of it too. I'm not a perfect person at all. And you certainly get up in the morning, wake up, sort of rub the eyes a little bit and think, I wonder what's happened in the world, and turn on the phone and have a look at it. And there's just stuff everywhere. And you go, oh man, look at all this. And all of a sudden, for most people, that will then start to just navigate the path of the day, rather than people taking ownership and saying, you know what, I'm just going to get up, go through a couple of routine things myself, these basic building blocks of habits. Maybe have 5-10 minutes, maybe do a little bit of exercise, maybe do some breathing, or just start thinking about what they've got on for that day. Anything like that just starts to create a little bit of forward momentum that's yours, and then we can start taking on other pieces of information and processing them in that way. Rather, okay, this is news, what can I do with that? Okay, well, let me get back on with what I was going to do, rather than that's the social media stream and everything like that starting to take over our days.
Interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of questions to be answered about the impact that news and social media is playing on people's well-being, especially now. I used to be consuming news and making sure I was up with current events, and then I realized, hey, hang on, maybe this doesn't contribute to my life. And then I kind of posed this question to a couple of different people, and there was two schools of thought. There was people who thought that it was important and valuable to be kept up to date with the news, and then there were people who kind of understood me and said, well, it's not going to impact your life. So I can't. There's kind of a dichotomy, and where do you? I believed them for a second. I said, I need to contribute. I need to make sure I'm up to date with everything. But obviously, if it impacts your health at all, it's a great thing to exclude.
Well, the updates are so fast, and so everything's changing so fast, and that's part of what makes the news feed so I don't want to say addictive, but it's very compulsive to keep just tuning back into it. And usually what I would suggest to people is you start thinking about, and maybe in that first 5 or 10 minutes of the day, what is it that I want to do? How much news do I need? How much time do I want to spend looking at it? And, across any given day, you could look at it maybe 5 times, but for 5 minutes, rather than getting really drawn into it, if you think that it's really important for you to keep across any updates that might be coming. But for most people, unless you're in a high-risk environment or there's a lot of stuff going on, just looking at it maybe in the morning and then at lunchtime and then in the evening is more than enough. That's more than what we need for the most part. And we can assume that if anything really dire is happening, people will call us or follow us up like that. And the same, there's a whole sort of tidal wave of different apps coming now which will help people manage the amount of social media on their phones and everything like that as well. So just started to think about, okay, if I'm going to be connected with everyone else in my social network, with the world, absolutely really, really important time to be doing that. I'm certainly not saying stop that or stop doing any of those things, but we need to be mindful of how much time that can start to take up. And there's a tipping point at which it starts to become less helpful, and then another tipping point at which it actually starts to be counter to our mental health and our overall health. And while we've spent, very quickly we can see a whole lot of time has just vanished into that area of social media, and all of a sudden we think, well, that's a whole maybe hour or something like that where I could have done something completely different. I could have gone for a walk around the block. I could have walked the dog. I could have actually got on the phone and called a friend. I could have read a book. I could have done all these different things. And so we need to start thinking about, okay, what's the net value of doing that if we're going to allocate time to it? If you're getting a really good value out of it, great. If you just think, I don't know, an hour just vanished, then maybe we need to rethink that a little bit.
Absolutely. And I put my hand up to fall into that category. How about do you have any predictions about things that we're going to have to deal with in the next kind of 6 to 12 months, but for like maybe on a community level and on a personal level? Have you had any put any thought to that?
I think the next 6 to 12 months are going to be, quite clearly they're going to be very, very interesting times. Our communities are put under pressure that they've never really had to face before, and probably not in anyone's lifetime, at least anyone here. And that is starting to think about, okay, well, how do we function when there's just simply less opportunities to be able to see each other, less opportunities to be able to connect with other people, less opportunities to start thinking about what we can get on and do. And so it's really important that we start to be really creative around that. And that means we need to go back and not necessarily expect to do things in the same way that we've done them before. So starting to think about, okay, well, if I'm going to be doing exercise, what's that going to look like? If I'm going to be thinking about my diet, what's that going to look like? What am I going to do about that? How am I going to manage that? Because, quite often when we're just sitting at home and we're away from a whole lot of things, and there's quite a fair bit of stuff that I've been seeing come up for people where they are literally just using that time to fill with putting something in their mouth. And that's not necessarily a problem in of itself, but starting to think about, well, what am I doing that for and why am I doing that? So in our community, we start thinking about how do we start to reconnect? What are going to be the ways that we can do that? So starting to really actively use our online supports around that, reconnecting back with your old networks, making sure that you're getting value through those connections, and that there's lots of online software packages that can help with that. Making sure that you are actually speaking to people on a regular basis. It's sometimes people need a bit of a poke in their ribs these days, Richard, to be able to pick up the phone and give someone a phone call. And the new etiquette is text someone and say, hey, I'm going to call you in a minute. 10 years ago that would have seemed ridiculous, but that's exactly where we're at the moment. So we need to keep, that's fine, push on with that, call people. And I would be suggesting that people start to set themselves some guidelines around that for themselves. You know what? I'm going to speak to at least 5, maybe 10 people every day. I'm going to give them a call and just write a list in the morning when I'm suggesting get out of bed and start thinking about what you want to do for the day. Write a list. Who am I going to call today? And start working through that back catalogue as opposed to just going through the social media feed, liking stuff and making brief comments and things. So there, some of the challenges that we face is that social connection that we've assumed would be always where it is going to be a little bit different. And even when we start to see the current status quo wind back a little bit, which probably will happen in the next few weeks, it's going to be a long time, I think, until we've got a vaccine, really, until we're back to the old world as we knew it. And even then, it's very likely to be different. People will have different ways of connecting, communicating with each other, and they'll be used to doing those things. So it's I'm not really a futurist, but I think that's going to be a very interesting time.
Good point. Yeah, I'm pretty guilty of that. What about I kind of I tell people and I tell myself that I'm quite content staying spending time by myself. And, being a loner, we'll call it, for days at a time. Given that my job is highly, I have to be speaking to people and interacting with people all day. Do I fall into a different category, or am I the same? Am I just as susceptible to...
So we're talking about introverts versus extroverts?
I think so, yeah, maybe.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like to me. So, and absolutely, these extroverts are going to find this time more challenging than not. That's just the reality. Introverts, they might have been hoping and praying that this day might have come. They're really the deep-seated introverts. I don't know. So maybe their prayers have been answered here. But I do think that is that over time is what tends to happen is we have just a dropping away of our social networks. And so that's a natural kind of process that happens over time. We have friendships that sort of we fall out of touch and things like that. And social media is really good at just keeping us connected at a base level, but really thinking about that's a connection at a base level. And for introverts is that 5 to 10 that I'm talking about. For some extroverts would look at that and think it needs to be 20 for me. And for a lot of introverts, they'd look at that and think, whoa, I'm going to talk to 10 people in a day. You're going to be killing me. Let's just start with 1 or 2. But nonetheless, is just making sure that we're keeping those friendships live, active, and that we're able to manage those. The things that if we do start to have a tough time psychologically and our mental health starts to get frayed, it's a stressful time where everything's very different. What are going to be the markers of that? And just having some sounding boards off our friends and family is really, really important.
Yeah, good one. How is your industry done? How's it pivoted to the current climate? Have you moved your business online? Are you seeing people in person? What's the deal?
It is. It's a really, really interesting time, and it's been well documented through the press that a lot of people are finding this time really, really stressful.
Yeah.
And it is. It's hard, and we see all the numbers to the contacts to Beyond Blue and Crisis Line. Their numbers are through the roof. And what that tells us is that people are really, really feeling the pressure, the stress, and they're responding to that, and their mental health is becoming fragmented. We're seeing an increase in people talking about what is the point of it all, and all that fairly dramatic silver side, getting down that end of the spectrum, if you like. Now, it's not to say that, and we might see in time there's an increase in those sorts of things, but I think that we've got enough supports in our community, in our society, that we should be able to keep in touch with people, get in touch with other professionals. And we know that when people are using those crisis type services, is that usually that happens at the beginning. And so it's been 2, 3, 4 weeks of this at the moment. And what starts to happen is people start to move into a forward-facing direction where they think, okay, this is not going away, this issue that I have, I need to start talking with someone about it and forming constructive plans. And at that point in time, they start to use psychologists out in the community, other services that are out in the community as well, to start really putting together plans to make these sorts of things work. So myself, most of the other people that I know in the industry are providing really great stuff online, and that's one-on-one consults. Sometimes we're doing couple counselling, and a lot of relationships were doing just great until everyone got locked in the house together, as you might imagine, Richard. And so there's a different dynamic happening there. And so, and that's just change. And so how do we manage that? How do we navigate that? For some people, that's a couple of just quick conversations to make sure they're both headed in the same direction, or as an individual, they're headed in the right direction. But for other people, it starts to expose some of the cracks or some of the challenges that were there before, and then it can be a little bit more than that. So everyone's different, and every situation is different. But generally speaking, is the quality of online support is really good.
I think. Well, I don't know. You'd have the answer to this, but I think people would be more willing to recognise this as a temporary situation, and that they should seek help, as opposed to thinking this is the way it is in terms of relationships and whatever else. Is that your experience, or are you seeing some denial or people believing that their relationships are not satisfactory? Or
I think it's situations that happen when things come up is we throw a rock in the pond and we see ripples come across everywhere, is the reality, isn't it? So and we've thrown a pretty damn big rock in the pond here, Richard. So there's going to be a few people that are sitting in kayaks that get swept away by some of those ripples, if they're not careful, and they're not really focusing on how they're going to manage them when they're coming. So for some couples and some situations, it's going to be more of a profound wave that really hits them. For other people, they're kind of ready, or they just happen to be pointing in the right direction when that wave comes, and there won't be such a huge deal for them. So I think that for anyone that's starting to feel that they're really getting a little bit, things are getting on top of them, my advice always, and this situation is no different to any others, is to get on top of things early rather than later. It's far easier to start thinking about making forward progress on things when the challenges are very, very small, as opposed to waiting till they're huge, and we can start to work through those at that point in time. And that's when, as I mentioned before, people might have 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 conversations, and then everything's kind of moving forward. And I'm certainly working with people and helping them form 30-day plans. How do they get through this time? How do they make sense of the new environment? What kinds of things do they want to get out of this time? Because if we start saying, okay, this is what's happened, how do I get the best out of this? How do I get the best out of this for me, for my friends, my family, and make sure that we come out of this really on top of things. And people that aren't making that type of action plan, they're more prone to sort of feeling like they're a victim in the situation, that their world's been pulled, the carpet's been pulled out from underneath them. Everything's hard and they don't know what to do. They start, their exercise drops away, their sleep becomes interrupted, they're sitting up at night watching movies instead of getting their regular sleep, and all those kinds of things that on any given day is probably not a big deal, but at a point in time like this when there's a lot of change going on, a lot of new things that are happening, then that sort of predisposes them to more challenges downstream.
Right. And are you sharing content at the moment? Your Facebook is chock-a-block full of good stuff, isn't it?
I've set up and I've just been starting to develop some content to go into a group called the Resilience Project. So this group is really been set up at the back of this coronavirus process to help people get access to really good quality evidence-based information, so that we're not just seeing things flat out there that are kind of rumors and things like that. We want to see people access support services, and I want to see people access supports and resources that are evidence-based. And so the Resilience Project is a Facebook group. You can just search for that on there. At the moment, it's a private group. I'll probably open that up for a period of time. I'm just wanting to make sure that people don't get on there and start doing crazy stuff that can happen sometimes in the Facebook world. So I'm just sort of taking that one day at a time there. And then also my website's Body Mind Health, and bodymindhealth.com.au. And I'm actually in the process also just looking at setting up a coronavirus page on there, or a COVID-19, which will have tip sheets and things like that on there for people to manage this time as well.
Fantastic. I'm just going to leave a comment under this with your website and so your Facebook page as well, because most people will be tuning in through Facebook. Is that?
Yep. So Scott Whiteway and the BMH actually for Body Mind Health. So I might send you a link.
Yeah. Yep. Cool.
Did you get that?
Scoot, not Scoot. Scott.
My nickname for a long time at school is Scooter, so that's all right.
Either or.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, I'm going to get people to come across if they think that suits them. And I'd like to thank you for dropping some your wealth of knowledge to my followers and whoever listens to this. That's been fantastic. Thank you so much.
No, cool.
Scott,
thanks, Richard, and good luck to everyone, and hope that everyone's doing really well in this tough time.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Take care.
Right.
And see you later. End of podcast. Cheers.